Marine reacts to SCP-507, also known as Reluctant Dimension Hopper, and is object class safe by the Exploring series. And as always, I'm going to be posting a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Alright, so just a quick announcement about the channel in general. Due to current conditions as far as work, schooling, things of that nature, life, the schedule, at least for the gameplays, are going to be 2 times a week. It's not going to specifically be Tuesdays or Thursdays only. So it'll just be whenever I'm able to get a gameplay out. And I'm going to try to keep it to at least 2 a week. And then that way I can reduce the types of situations as what happened yesterday, where we had a power outage, my video stopped uploading, and then it just took forever to actually get it started up again and then get it to continue to upload. And also I feel like with the gameplays, you know, just for personal reference, if anyone has a game, it doesn't even have to be scary in general. It could be literally any game that maybe you want to see some gameplay of. I'm definitely open up to play different types of games, different types of genres. So if you do have any suggestions, you can leave them down in the comments below. So coming back to SCP-507, again, not too much information. I have been getting into a lot of dimension and reality related SCPs, and obviously Reluctant Dimension Hopper in the title. It's gonna get me interested to see what kind of dimensions are going to be stated in this in these documents, and kind of just like what this guy's been through, what he's like, and also see if he actually interacts with other SCP foundations in different dimensions. So that's going to be interesting to check out. But before we get into the actual SCP video, don't forget to like, subscribe. It really does help me a lot. Hit that notification bell right there. That way you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes uploading twice a day. Typically working on them in the mornings and then releasing them in the late afternoon or late evening. So when you get off work, you enjoy these videos at your leisure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see what SCP-507 or the Reluctant Dimension Hopper is all about.
SCP-507 Reluctant Dimension Hopper. Most of the SCPs on the list are things alien to our existence in one way or another. We're not sure how or why they exist, and there's little for us to relate to when discussing them. There are SCPs, however, that are in most ways normal humans, and they need to eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom like the rest of us, but something makes them quite unique. Most of these anomalous humans end up being somewhat depressing in some fashion, due to being confined for the rest of their lives by the Foundation, or their anomalous property affects them in a very negative way. It's this aspect that we'll focus on today while discussing SCP-507. As I mentioned, 507 is a normal human in practically every way. Caucasian, blonde hair with green eyes, and somewhat overweight. He needs to eat, drink, and sleep, and possesses no special physical or biological traits. This is often unfortunate for him, however, as his anomalous property forces him to occasionally shift into another dimension or reality.
Alright, so the way he said it, it causes him to shift. So it doesn't seem like he might have control over this just right off the bat. So it might be something that happens involuntarily, which would be kind of terrifying when you think about it, because it could happen in literally just like that. So
these shifts are spontaneous, even occurring while sleeping or using the bathroom, and 507 has no control over when he shifts into another dimension or when he shifts back. These alternate dimensions vary wildly, with some being only slightly different from our baseline reality, and others drastically different, featuring dangerous entities or conditions. 507's containment procedures mainly involve him being constantly monitored, and although he is allowed much more freedom than most SCPs, he is still normally confined to a Foundation facility.
Also, just real quick, going off of when they said that since he doesn't have control when he shifts to a different reality and comes back, so he's at least still pinpointed to this dimension that he's in, right? So, because, or is it possible if he went to one dimension, right, shifted there, Is it possible he could get shifted to a completely different dimension again? And not have it be the one he came from? Or is it somehow pinpointed back to that original one? If so, man, that's... Shit, man. That sounds insanely depressing. Terrifying, if anything, because you don't know what's going to be in these dimensions. You don't even know if there's going to be oxygen. So, the fact that this guy's still kicking, as far as I know, is kind of a miracle in a sense.
He has a tracking device implanted in him so that the Foundation can easily retrieve him after a shift, as he rarely pops back up where he left. After retrieval, he'll generally give a report on the dimension he visited, as well as potentially make any requests, such as a flashlight he can carry, or a gun that shoots rubber bullets. It is possible for someone else to travel with 507 if they are touching him when he shifts. But after the Foundation inadvertently discovered this, losing an agent in the process, they established a new protocol that no one is allowed to touch 507 after 2 weeks from him returning from a shift. They learned that there's always a period of at least 2 weeks between shifts, which gives 507 at least some time to rest safely.
So he has a 2-week window every time he comes back. I wonder if he can, if he's carrying, obviously it could be inanimate objects because he's also asked for, he could ask for a flashlight. I don't know if they said that he did, but as long as he has contact with something, he can bring it with him, it seems.
The main bulk of 507's article, then, is comprised of a log recording all of his shifts since arriving in the Foundation's custody. There's simply too many here for me to go over all of them in detail, and likely more will continue to be added as time goes on, so I'd encourage you to read through them yourself if you're interested. In one dimension, 507 was left in complete darkness, and began to fumble around looking for a light, or a way out. But after hearing something like soft breathing nearby, decided to just stop and wait it out. 507 later shifted back to what seemed like the same location, but now had a flashlight that he carried with him. He turned on the flashlight and saw a man in a business suit with an impossibly wide smile leaning only inches from his face. The smiling man asked, "Back so soon?" causing 507 to switch off the flashlight, discharge all of his rubber bullets from his gun, and crawl into a corner. Another time, in apparently the same dimension.
Hold on, real quick. Back again so soon. They didn't say he had been there before. But back again so soon. It also makes me wonder if this is like kind of if he has the, I don't know what you would call it, but I don't know, some of y'all have watched X-Men and see Nightcrawler and one of the cartoon versions that they ended up saying when he teleports, he would go through a dimension and then go to wherever he was teleporting. So maybe he goes through a specific dimension every time to get to where he's in a shift. And he's probably been through it maybe so many times that I don't know who this dude is, but he's probably seen him before. Maybe he hasn't seen the smiling guy because it was always dark, but maybe the dude could see in the dark. Just kind of a theory for right now.
507 heard muted breathing again, and began wandering around in the darkness until he saw a light source at the end of a corridor. As he grew closer, the light grew in intensity, and 507 began experiencing a searing pain, causing him to pass out. When he was retrieved, the top layer of his epidermis had been found to be burned away, and he was wearing a pair of large sunglasses, although 507 didn't know where they came from. 507 traveled to this dimension yet again, turned on his flashlight, and found the smiling man in front of him, with a mysterious brown liquid leaking from behind his sunglasses. The smiling man asked, "Why did you do this?" before wiping some of the brown liquid and rubbing it on 507's cheek, causing him to push the smiling man away. Now he noticed that the smiling man's suit contained several holes, with brown liquid trailing down from them. 507 attempted to shoot his pistol at the entity, but it failed to fire, causing him to flee and hide for the rest of the shift. In another instance, 507 traveled to a forest and grew hungry, so he ate some of the local plant life. The plants then unleashed some form of a telepathic scream in response, causing him to abstain from eating anything. The following day, however, he grew hungry enough to deal with the screams and ate some of the plants. Sometime later, 507 traveled back to this dimension, but this time the plants apparently remembered him and screamed non-stop for 4 days.
So it's not a new dimension every time. Sometimes he can go back to the original ones. And when the guy, Smiling Man, said that back again so soon, I'm not really sure. They said that 507 actually remembered him, whether or not he did. So.
Later, he returned to this dimension again, but this time the plants remained silent, and so 507 climbed to the top of a nearby hill to get a lay of the land. He saw that the forest was thick with trees in all directions, and surrounding the forest was a massive blue dome. There have been a number of times that 507 has shifted into a dimension and encountered an analog to the SCP Foundation. In one dimension, the Foundation was known as the Society for Containment of the Paranormal, possessing a strong British influence, and was opposed by the Covert Occult Group and the Church of the Mending God. 507 was detained as an intruder and repeatedly questioned until he shifted back. Another time, 507 was gone from our dimension for 3 months, during which he encountered another Foundation equivalent, but this time managed to become a member of their personnel. 507 managed to learn about several SCPs that our Foundation did not know about, allowing them to later retrieve them, and was working in the field to retrieve another one when he finally shifted back. Curiously, our Foundation had sent an MTF to retrieve the same SCP during that time, suggesting an unusual potential connection between the two dimensions. In another dimension, 507 found that their Foundation equivalent had inverted all of the offices and containment chambers, so that the Foundation personnel were being contained due to their ability to create dangerous experiments, and the containment staff consisted of anomalous humanoids, although more docile than our reality's versions. Due to this, the facility was filled with memetic hazards and other dangers, and it is unknown how a more drastic scenario had not already occurred there. Other times, 507 has actually encountered other versions of himself.
I was honestly just thinking that too. Has this guy seen himself like in other dimensions? Yeah. But obviously he did.
In one reality, 507 found himself in the midst of a snowstorm, drastically unprepared. Before he succumbed to exposure, however, he was rescued by another man and pulled into a cave. 507 was led to an underground hot spring to recover, and was soon joined by the man, who turned out to be another version of himself. The conversation between the two is unlogged, but 507 noticed that this version of him had scarring across his torso and at the bases of his limbs. In a more notable example, the Foundation found 2 507s in his containment chamber who had been talking for some time. Both of them admitted to encountering the Smiling Man, showing a potential connection between the entity and all versions of 507. Both of them had also decided not to admit which one belonged to this dimension and which one was the visitor. While talking, one of the 507s disappears, and the doctor asks the remaining one what the difference between their realities was. The remaining 507 says that in the other's reality, Lincoln was killed by his vice president, instead of by General Lee. The doctor informs him that in this reality, Booth assassinated Lincoln. We're informed that testing revealed that 507's ability has no biological basing, as severed pieces still shift along with the main body, suggesting the Foundation maimed that version of 507 in some way before he shifted back. Our version of 507 returned a few days later, and was not informed of the incident. Like I said, 507 is not a particularly cheerful tale, as he lives his entire life either trapped in a Foundation facility or teleporting off to an alien world. Some of these are nightmarish and horrific, filled with spiders, hostile aliens, or hazardous environments, while others are surprisingly pleasant. One dimension was so perfect that 507 attempted to commit suicide after returning because nothing could compare. While 507 is ripe for creative writing due to the infinite number of alternate dimensions he could travel to, it's also interesting due to some of the questions that go unanswered, such as why he hasn't shifted into a dimension where he's encased in rock, or on a planet with no breathable air. Despite the limitless amount of potential dangers, 507 always manages to make it back home, and most of the time in relatively good spirits. Although I would never want a life like 507's, I certainly enjoy reading about it.
Alright, let's talk about that for a minute. I had one real big thing I really wanted to point out. Who is this smiling guy? I didn't get too much of an explanation with him. And obviously, not only has it been seen by multiple 507s, it's also, he seems to run into him a lot, just from what I saw. I mean, then again, he goes to different dimensions as well, but what I also didn't understand was when he was going to a different dimension, shifting, and again, it sucks he doesn't have any control in this, because it could literally happen at any moment, but as soon as he shifts back, does he always shift back to his original dimension? Or is he just going from dimension to dimension and then maybe he comes back to his original one? Or would he go through multiple ones and then come back to the original one? Or how does he even know if he's in the original one he was in? I mean, unless they asked him the question like with the Lincoln one, where one of them said he was shot by the vice president. I don't remember what the other one said, but then he said in this one that he was shot by John Wilkes Booth. So, and then I'm really glad that they at least mentioned, or like I was somewhat on the right track as far as that. Two things, like he wasn't that they're not sure how he hasn't like shifted and gone into a piece of rock or somewhere where there was like no oxygen and he couldn't breathe and he immediately dies. Just even thinking about how kind of dimensions can differ, some very small, some very drastic. Surprised this guy is still alive. But then again, he did see that they saw one that had cuts on the lower parts of their limbs, his limbs. And then just as far as your sanity, man, like how do you deal with this knowing you have absolutely no control, and when you do come back to where you were from, you're gonna get locked up? But I mean, that's gonna go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me out a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it, that way it helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what videos are coming up next, check the description down below and see a little list right there from top to bottom. That's gonna show you the order I'm gonna view them in. But until then, see you all in the next video.